actually has a very anti-war protest message. But then in 1968, the Beatles released their White Album, and they re-released the song, okay? And I want you to listen very carefully to it, because they make some slight changes to it.
I take two. Okay.
Hear it? Yes, that's the next line. Did you hear what they said? Did you hear it? Don't you know that you can count me out? Did you hear the word that they said right after? In, right? It's just, they just barely put it in there, but I'll back it up. Listen again.
Don't you know that you can count me out in? Don't you know it's coming, please? Do all right.
Anyway, so they actually go and alter their own song, right? They kind of go, am I out, am I in? I'm not really sure anymore, right? And then with events like Woodstock and some of the bands that really develop later on in the decade and into the 70s, you get groups that are just like explicitly all they do, and I should underline explicitly, especially with regard to Woodstock, all they do is write songs that are protest songs about the Vietnam War. One of them is Country Joe and the Fish, and I'll play a little bit of this song. I played it at the beginning of class, but just listen for a second, because this isn't subtle at all, right? As long as it plays. Seems like it should be playing. Let's try again.
Well, come on, all of you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books, pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. Whoopee, we're all gonna die. Come on, generals, and let's move fast. Your big chances come at last. Now you can't go out and get those reds. Only good commie is one that's dead. You know that peace can only be one when the blood of all the kingdom come. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. Whoopee, we're all gonna die. Hey!
I know, right? Catchy. And as you can see, I'm not sure if you can read this, but the song is called I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag, okay? So they were very, very overtly anti-war. And then there are just like more subtle songs that are reinterpretations, again, of various songs that become symbolic of protest against the war. This is Joe Cocker's version of the Beatles song With a Little Help from My Friends, which became really iconic of the time period. This is the actual version from Woodstock. And so I think I have to start somewhere in the middle here, because there's like an 8-minute like guitar riff that goes at the beginning, before they actually start. I should really show Joe Cocker. Has anybody ever seen Joe Cocker sing? Yeah? And what does he do?
It's kind of weird. It looks a little possessed.
Yes, he looks possessed. Yes, that's the best explanation of it. Should we see it? Do you want to see it? Yeah. All right, let's see it. It kind of ruins the song, I think, honestly, but it's worth seeing for a moment. Captioned for the clear-headed.
What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song. I will try not to sing out of key.
On a key.
Oh, baby,
I was not expecting this, but apparently, there you go. I'm terrified as to where it's going to go from here, but I'll post the link in case anybody wants to find out. Anyway, all right. So there are a variety of, in short, there are a variety of cultural reactions to it, and we haven't had a chance to talk about the civil rights movement in great detail, but it's important to understand one important key aspect of the civil rights movement, which is that people, African Americans, particularly in the South, trying to end the Jim Crow laws that kind of separated them, trying to get schools integrated, all of the violence, all of the conflict and the terrible things that go on during the civil rights movement tie very deeply with the Vietnam War protest and resistance movement. And it's really not until the two become tied, particularly when Martin Luther King Jr. Takes an anti-war stand and kind of welds the two into a single movement, that they really begin to take off, okay? Now, a couple of things to understand. Number one, Lyndon B. Johnson. I want to just, well, let's go with McNamara first, sorry. Oh, baby Hogify, all right. So what I want to show one last clip of McNamara, right? And this is the most critical part in my mind for understanding the Vietnam War.
Not a damn human thinks that 50,000 or 100,000 or 150,000 are going to end that war. We're not getting out, but we're trying to hold what we got. And we're doing the bad. We're doing. We're losing at the rate we're going.
It was announced today that.
So that was Lyndon B. Johnson from the tapes. By the way, very fascinating thing that happened in the Kennedy administration was that they had gone and put in tapes, these tape recorders, all throughout the White House, so that they could record everything that was said in the White House and attach to the phones to sort of record them for posterity. And so that's why we have these tapes of what Johnson actually says in the White House to people. It took a long time to release them, but we have these actual tapes of these conversations that go on inside the White House.
American casualties in Vietnam now number 4,877, including 748 killed.
Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, on each of his 7 inspection trips to Vietnam, has found some positive aspect to the course of the war there.
The most vivid impression I'm bringing back is that we've stopped losing the war. The North Vietnamese today, we believe, have 9 regiments of
Some of the men had little training in a state park in Kentucky before coming here.
but it did not prepare them for the thicket of trees, spiked vines, thorn bushes, almost perpendicular cliffs, 90-degree temperature, insects.
This has changed from a nasty little war to a nasty middle-sized war. The Vietnamese are still doing most of the fighting and most of the dying. But week after week, American casualty figures go up.
Now, America wins the wars that she undertakes. Make no mistake about it. And we have declared war on tyranny and aggression. If this little nation goes down the drain and can't maintain her independence, ask yourself what's going to happen to all the other little nations. I am more and more convinced that we ought to think of some action other than military action as the only program here. But I think if we do that by itself, it's suicide. I think pushing out 300,000, 400,000 Americans out there without being able to guarantee what it will lead to is a terrible risk and a terrible problem.
Let me go back one moment. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, at the end, I think we did put ourselves in the skin of the Soviets.
Cuban Missile Crisis, we haven't really covered it, but the Cuban Missile Crisis is a key event in the Cold War where we discovered that the Soviets were trying to place intercontinental ballistic missiles not way over in Russia, but in Cuba, just right down here, right? Like just not that a stone's throw away from Florida. And it was this terrifying situation because that mutually assured destruction that we talked about as the thing that sort of was the glue that held together the Cold War, it never got closer to actually happening than during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because we went and we blockaded Cuba so that Russian ships could not get in, and Russian ships were headed that way, and it was 13 days of just, is the world going to end, right? And that's what everybody had on their minds. What is going to happen? How is this going to play out? And that's what McNamara is talking about here. So he's saying by the end, they were successful. We were able to get ourselves out of this situation by really putting ourselves in the shoes of the Soviet Union, of the Soviet leaders.
In the case of Vietnam, we didn't know them well enough to empathize. And there was total misunderstanding as a result. They believed that we had simply replaced the French as a colonial power and we were seeking to subject South and North Vietnam to our colonial interests, which was absolutely absurd. And
which is absolutely absurd, but what does it sound like? Let's go back to the very beginning of American history, right? It's us, right? We're England to the Vietnamese, right? If we go back to the colonial war.
We saw Vietnam as an element of the Cold War, not what they saw it as, a civil war. There aren't many examples in which you bring two former enemies together at the highest levels and discuss what might have been. I formed the hypothesis that each of us could have achieved our objectives without the terrible loss of life. And I wanted to test that by going to Vietnam. The former foreign minister of Vietnam, a wonderful man named Thua, said, "You're totally wrong. We were fighting for our independence. You were fighting to enslave us." We almost came to blows. That was noon on the first day. Do you mean to say it was not a tragedy for you when you lost 3,400,000 Vietnamese killed which on our population base is the equivalent of 27 million Americans, what did you accomplish? You didn't get any more than we were willing to give you at the beginning of the war. You could have had the whole damn thing. Independence, unification. Mr. McNamara, you must never have read a history book. If you'd had, you'd know we weren't pawns of the Chinese or the Russians. McNamara, didn't you know that? Don't you understand that we have been fighting the Chinese for 1,000 years? We were fighting for our independence, and we would fight to the last man, and we were determined to do so. And no amount of bombing, no amount of U.S. pressure would ever have stopped us.
I'm just going to leave it right at that lesson, because this is fascinating to me. McNamara, the architect of the Vietnam War. I want to tell you something about McNamara, okay? Number one, if you hadn't noticed, at the beginning of the war, he tried to argue that it was unwinnable, right? He argued that it was unwinnable. He argued with Kennedy that if we're going to both try and not trigger war with the Soviet Union, that's going to kill us all, and win here, we're going to have to play a little dance that we will not win. And he tried to withdraw, but under the Johnson administration, Johnson continually pushed for victory. And Johnson, who I talked a little bit about, this is important to understand about Johnson. Johnson is if you know Johnson, you probably hate him, right? That's like his role in American history, is that he's hated for his role in the Vietnam War. And if you think of John F. Kennedy, you love John F. Kennedy, right? Because he seems like a great president. But there are a couple aspects to know about Johnson. One is that Johnson did things that John F. Kennedy never ever could have achieved. Not in Vietnam, but in America, right? The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, all of the civil rights laws that effectively won the civil rights movement, that made Americans equal, finally kind of closing the wounds of the Civil War. Johnson was the one who got those passed. Kennedy did not. Kennedy did not have the power that Johnson did, where Johnson would go and he would corner each and every single congressman and senator that he needed to, and use that treatment where he gets 2 inches from their face and yells at them and tells them that they're going to be nothing, their grave is going to be nothing but a stick in the mud back in Alabama somewhere if they don't vote the way he needs them to vote, right? I mean, he knew how to get things done. That guy got more legislation passed than anybody else. But he didn't know a damn thing about Vietnam. And nobody did, right? That's the point that McNamara makes right here. We were fighting a war that we didn't understand. We just saw the Cold War, but we didn't act as students of history. When Bill Cobb, who used to teach the Vietnam War history class here, who was a Vietnam War veteran, and his father was a general during Vietnam. When he would teach his Vietnam War history class, we would start in 2000 BC to understand the Vietnam War, right? Because in order to understand, you have to understand Vietnam, which we didn't do, right? That clip that I showed you last time, where Lyndon tells McNamara, I want a memo about the Vietnam picture, 4-letter words, 2 pages, keep it simple. Right? No, do not keep it simple. If you want to understand something, you have to actually understand it. If you're going to undertake a war where you commit tens, hundreds of thousands of lives, understand who you're fighting, right? Because the Vietnamese had been fighting guerrilla warfare for over 1,000 years, right? That's what we didn't understand. We could have figured it out, but we didn't. They had been fighting guerrilla warfare for independence from China for over 1,000 years, off and on for 3,000 years. And we didn't understand that. All those tactics that they had, the tunnels that they would dig, the fighting out of the jungle where you least expected it, setting traps, that was because they had been fighting for independence before our country had ever begun, right? They had been fighting a revolutionary war for so long that it was just, practically in the DNA of the country. And so they didn't see us as liberators. They didn't see us as trying to liberate them. We were just the next power. After it was China, it was Japan. After Japan, it was France. After France, it was us. And we thought that we could beat them into submission in a few years when they had been fighting for over 1,000 years for their freedom. And so this, be prepared to examine your reasoning, I think, is the key thing that we should learn from the Vietnam War, right? And it's something that as a country we are terrible at. As a country and as a people we are terrible at because we don't like to re-examine our reasoning. We like to work from our biases, from our assumptions, and to not actually put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else, which is exactly why we did the C-School thing and the empathy thing and all that sort of thing. All right, let me walk you through a couple of things real quickly. One of the most important unintended consequences of all this is, I'm showing Nixon, but I should start somewhere else. Lyndon B. Johnson wanted more than anything in life to be President of the United States. Let me show you right here. But his legacy, he wanted to help people. He wanted to gain power. He did anything and everything he had to become President of the United States. And he did some of the most remarkable and important legislation in the history of the country would not have happened without him. But that is not how we remember him. We remember him for this, for the Vietnam War Memorial. How many have visited it? All right, good. I'm glad to see the numbers. What's it like? Somebody tell me what it's like when you see this thing. Right back there. Right? Because what is it? And what's on it? Just name after name of people who died, right? And it goes up. It follows the sequence of years of the war and rises with them. And you can see just the scope of death. And I've been to the Vietnam War Memorial probably 50 times. And every time I go there, you know, not every time do you see something like this, but I've seen it more than once where some veteran goes there for the first time and finds a comrade that he fought with listed on that wall. This is Johnson's legacy, whether he wanted it or not. This is the result. This, to me, is one of the most important pictures in American history. This is Johnson watching the video of himself announcing that he will not run for re-election. A man who was willing to do anything for his entire life in order to become president eventually realizes that with the Vietnam War, he has done something that will make him unelectable. And he goes on television and announces he will not run for re-election. There's a look on Johnson's face, but this is his daughter right here, okay? And she understands what it means for her father to say, I will not run for re-election, right? You can see it there. What she understands exactly what this means for Lyndon. When he retires, he goes to his ranch in Texas, grows his hair out like the young hippies who had protested him all through the war, and he dies within a few years of a massive heart attack. He gave up, right? He basically gives up on life afterwards, and to me he's a symbol of so many different things: American ambition and the inability to look at the big picture in things. Nixon becomes president, but he becomes president in the midst of what is considered one of the most horrible and one of the biggest turning points in American history, the 1968 election. Two things happen in 1968 besides the election. Robert F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's younger brother, runs for president on a campaign of peace in Vietnam, right? And he's assassinated, he's killed, which is huge. And then the other major figure of this time period, Martin Luther King Jr., is also assassinated, all during the span of this election, when the President of the United States announces that he will not seek re-election. In the end, Richard Nixon is elected president, and he becomes President of the United States. He does commit to get us out of Vietnam, And he eventually withdraws this. However, he does continue to try and win the war, and he tries to win it primarily with bombing. And he decides to bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail, right? That little trail that goes outside of Vietnam. So he's actually bombing in other countries in order to try and win this war in Vietnam. It is largely considered, and I will admit that this is disputed, but it is largely considered to be the case that the bombing that he commits in Cambodia in order to win the war in Vietnam leads to a communist leader and a terrible dictator named Pol Pot taking control in Cambodia, who then commits genocide against his own people and kills 1 in 4 Cambodians. But he's able to rise to power because people are upset about the Americans bombing their country when they're not really involved in this war, right? So there's a different domino effect than the one we expected, right? One that we cause through our bombing trying to win this other war. And the unintended consequences of war are this huge piece that we leave behind. Nixon, of course, is impeached, or not impeached. He gets close to impeached. He runs into a great deal of trouble, and part of the reason why he runs into trouble is because he also is very anxious to become president of the United States and get reelected, and is willing to do just about anything to do that, including creating an illegally funded group that breaks into the Democratic National Headquarters to steal information that they have on various people. And it is thanks to these hidden tapes inside the White House that he eventually resigns as president, right? Because is it 16 minutes? 17 minutes of tape that are mysteriously erased, okay? And the president's secretary said that she must have done it accidentally, and I won't pull up the picture, but if you want to just Google for the picture of his secretary showing how she would have accidentally done it, because she said she did it while she was transcribing, and then they asked how the room was set up. And so in order for her to do it, she'd have to be like this, right? Like she's like accidentally erasing and typing at the same time. And just kind of unlikely. And so he resigns. And it leads to a lot of criticism and skepticism about American power, about the presidency and about the federal government and the strength that it has. And that kind of defines a lot of the next generation and what happens moving forward. Okay, so a couple of thoughts before we close up here. We've covered so much, right? We've covered the colonial period. We've covered everything that came before America really became a country. We've covered the founding, that big dividing line in the Civil War. We've gone to the major modern conflict of the past 50 years, Vietnam. What do you take away? What have you learned about American history that you didn't know before? Somebody. What stands out to you? Is there a big lesson? Is there a single lesson that stands out to you in particular? Yeah.
It's important to know the history so you don't repeat it, especially because right now we're in a conflict with Russia and North Korea.
Well, a lot of these same players, yeah.
So I think it's important to understand, especially because it's something that I didn't know before, that this is something that's happened before. So if you learn about the history of even the other countries that are in conflict or what's even going on with them at this moment, will be very insightful for us to know that kind of information, instead of kind of just being like, well, just give me, 2 sentences about what happened with them so we know how we can win this war.
Yeah. Yeah, the 2-sentence memo is always a bad idea. Okay.
One thing that stands out to me really clearly is that the decisions weren't always clear. It wasn't always clear what the right choice was, and the right choice wasn't always made in American history. Growing up, it's like, America's great, we live in the best country ever, but it's not always that clear. It's not always easy to make those decisions, and they weren't always made the right way because it wasn't clear.
Yeah. Is that a hand or just hair correction? Okay. All right, go.
For me, I kind of going along with what he said, in high school, we learned about U.S. history, you've all known about the Declaration of Independence, kind of how America came to be. But I think this class has really gone so much more in depth. I feel more privileged to live like in America because of how many lives were lost, how many people put so much of their life into America and how it came to be. So it's really kind of humbling in a way too. Special.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Thank you. So how much life has been put into America and making it this? Sometimes people go, man, that guy is really critical of America. And that's not what I'm trying to do. Okay, I want to make this really clear. I love this country, okay? But what I find interesting and what I find so important about it is that this is a country that is continually trying to live up to its aspiration, right? Think about the Declaration of Independence. Think about those principles of the founding. Did we get them right immediately? No, in a huge way, no, right? With issues of slavery and so forth. But we made so many terrible errors, so many terrible mistakes along the way. But at the end of it, there is a beauty to this country that is made all the more important because it is flawed, right? Because our efforts to try and make a country where everybody is equal, where freedom is a gift and something that we privilege, and that unfortunately we often do not appreciate as much as we should. So much sacrifice has gone into that. So many mistakes have been made along the way. So many things that hopefully, I pray, we've learned from as a nation. That's what America is. It's a messy struggle to make freedom and equality and all those founding principles a reality. And so, if nothing else, I hope you take that away from this class. I hope you take away an appreciation for what we've learned. And I want to answer this hand that's raised.
So it's not a question, it's just really another thing that through this class I've realized, not only about America, but for the world as well, that people in general are very, very passionate. And that's kind of something that I didn't realize growing up. You know, you see like things that have happened in history and you're like, okay, that was just a really turbulent time. But like we see this now in this past year, there's been a lot of passion, and we see this in Vietnam. They've been fighting this war forever, and I think that is something that people don't appreciate so much, and I think it should be.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks to all of you. This has been a long class where we crammed a ton of stuff into your brains, but I appreciate your patience. I appreciate you guys, and it's been a sincere pleasure. I've never taught a class this large, but it's been a pleasure to teach all of you and learn with all of you. There's a hand raised. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, what?
And then for the Vietnam War, there's no winner.
Yeah.
We all victims.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.